And welcome back to 35,000 Watts, the podcast. My name is Michael Miller. I'm here with Scott Mobley and Keith Porterfield. We are three ex-college radio DJs and executive staffers, and we have this little podcast so we can talk about college radio music, college radio culture, college radio stuff. We just put an episode in the can about college radio music documentaries. That's pretty cool. That'll be coming out or already out if you haven't listened to that one yet. This time, we're going to take... we're usually pretty positive guys, I think, and we usually like to talk about the things that we like and which albums we like best and which one-hit wonders we like best and cover songs. This time we're going to take a slightly different tack, and we're going to talk about albums that were huge, hugely popular, hugely influential, and that we personally just did not get. I think we have some good candidates for that. All three are undeniably popular, undeniably well-known college radio artists. The albums themselves were all big sellers in the U.S. for sure, and I think worldwide as well for all three of them. But in our individual cases, they just didn't really hit the mark. So I'll kick things off with a band, and I'll be honest, the band in general fits this category for me, not just the album, but the album I chose is Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magik. So that is, I guess, kind of seen as their breakthrough album. I mean, they had Mother's Milk before this, came out in the late 80s, and it was, I guess maybe you could consider that their breakthrough. It certainly had one or two pretty big songs on it. I think it was before my time in college radio and before I discovered college radio, but my sense is that it got a lot of college radio airplay, Mother's Milk, that is. And then, so Blood Sugar Sex Magik comes out in the magical year of 91 when everything was happening with, Nevermind comes out, Pearl Jam 10 comes out, the Seattle scene is booming, alternative quote-unquote music is booming, and in the midst of that, Red Hot Chili Peppers, who of course are from LA, release Blood Sugar Sex Magik. And I got to tell you, there's not a single song on this album that I particularly care for, and I never really came around to the album or the group in general. I'm sure, I know there are millions and millions and millions of Red Hot Chili Pepper fans. I imagine the next thing I'm going to say is probably anathema to them, which is that the only song I actually like from Red Hot Chili Peppers is The Other Side from Californication, which I think is the album that most hardcore Chili Pepper fans say is kind of the least Chili Pepper of all the albums. Probably why I like it the most of all the Red Hot Chili Pepper albums. Like, if I had to listen to a Red Hot Chili Pepper album, it would be Californication. But particularly The Other Side is really the only track that I can honestly say that I like. Like, I would voluntarily listen to that. I involuntarily had to listen to a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers in the day, whether it was in rotation at KTXT, it was in rotation at MTV. You heard it out and about. I mean, that album was so huge. It's one of those that was just out in the ether, and like you just heard it wherever you went. But going through some of the songs, Breaking the Girl, it never quite got. I just despise Under the Bridge. I cannot. I could go my whole life without ever hearing Under the Bridge again and be so happy. Suck My Kiss, just nothing about that song really grabbed me. Give It Away is the only one that I can't say that I like it, and I can't say that I would want to voluntarily listen to it, but that's one that if it came up on rotation at KTXT, I wasn't super mad about it. Like, I can see, I guess, the appeal of that one. Band wise, I kind of have some mixed feelings. Flea seems like a decent enough guy, and he seems like he's kind of a fun dude. Chad Smith seems like a perfectly nice guy from what I've seen, and he seems kind of under the radar for the most part. Anthony Kiedis rubs me the wrong way. Everything about him kind of I have never really seen him as like that, rock star god that a lot of people do. The guitar situation has kind of fluctuated. I guess I don't really have any problem with John Frusciante in particular, and they had Dave Navarro on board for a little while there, and he's, I guess, really more associated with Jane's Addiction, but I'm kind of neutral on him. But it's not that I hate them. It's not that I don't think that they have the right to exist, or that I don't understand why. I guess people kind of like what they're doing. They've got the funk thing. They've got almost a little bit of hip hop style with songs like Suck My Kiss and Give It Away. it's unique. I think at the time in '91, it was a little more unique maybe than what was going on with some of the grunge bands that did maybe start to run together a little bit, particularly as the '90s wore on and some of the copycat bands came out. So I will give Red Hot Chili Peppers the credit for kind of representing the LA scene in a different way, and for being maybe a little more unique than some of the other bands that were on their tier at the time, which honestly was the top tier of alternative music. I think they were as big as any band was in the early '90s. I chose Blood Sugar Sex Magik. I think that it would have been maybe easier to choose One Hot Minute, but I think that's an easier case to even a fan might also agree with me about One Hot Minute not being that great of an album. So that felt too easy. And I think Blood Sugar Sex Magik is kind of universally loved, it seems like. So that seemed like a better choice for me it was huge. It was popular. It was influential, and it just completely flew over my head in every possible way. Yeah. I don't even, and this is one where I'm going in not knowing how you guys feel about the band or the album. So I'm curious what you guys think about it, and maybe you can enlighten me and open my eyes to the album or the band.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I like them a little bit better than you. They're not like one of my favorite bands or anything. The thing with me and the Chili Peppers is I think that they are a great singles band. The ones you mentioned, the singles off this album, Breaking the Girl, Suck My Kiss, Under the Bridge, Give It Away, are all good songs, in my opinion. I like all of them. To me, the Chili Peppers, like I said, are a great singles band, but man, listening to an entire Chili Peppers album is a lot. And especially this one. This one is 17 songs long. I mean, it just goes on and on. I think, there are other good songs on it. I like all of the singles. Like I said, I also like I Could Have Lied. The Righteous and the Wicked is a good song. The title track is a good song. I feel like if they had put the singles and a half dozen of the other songs on here and made a shorter, tighter album, they could have had a really good record on their hand. I'm just not a huge fan of their brand of funk rock, and so listening to it for over an hour for 17 songs was quite a slog. And I hadn't heard this album since it was out back in the early 90s, so it had been a while for me. I can understand why it got popular. Like I said, I think the singles are all good songs. I think they are a good singles band. I think if a Chili Pepper song comes up in the middle of a run of songs on the radio or in a shuffle situation or whatever, it's always fun to hear one of their songs. But yeah, listening to 17 of them in a row is quite a slog for me. So yeah, I don't dislike
such an overstuffed album,
right?
In my opinion.
So like I said, I don't dislike it, but I don't think I would like it as much as its fans do. It is to me kind of solidly okay, but I think it would have been a lot better had it gotten cut down to a more manageable 10, maybe 12 songs.
I'm going to land right between you two here, I think. And I'll tell you a little bit about my history with this band. So I was a big fan of their first two albums, Uplift, Mofo, Party Plan, and Mother's Milk. I think what they were trying to do on those albums was be a funk rock band, like you said, Keith. Like this is where funk and punk merge, maybe, or something like that. And they're really good at that. And there are hints of that here. Like, for example, the second track on this album, If You Have to Ask, that's a Parliament song. It's just, even though there's little backing vocals and everything, it sounds like a George Clinton song. That's what they were trying to do when they started, and I really liked that. This album is where they start to get into a little bit more of what they're going to be eventually. There's a couple of slow songs here. There's a couple of, things, and you kind of see the transition happening. There are good songs on this record. I really like the title track, Blood Sugar Sex Magik. I actually kind of like Under the Bridge and Breaking the Girl. I think those are both nice little gear shifts. I kind of agree with you, Michael, that I don't ever need to hear Under the Bridge again. But taking away the million of times I've heard it between in the 90s and now, I think that is a pretty solid song. I think it's produced really, really well. I don't know who produced this record, but there's some great production on here.
Rick Rubin, actually.
Is it Rick Rubin? Okay. They wanted to keep making funk rock. Unfortunately, what this album I think ended up creating is nu metal.
Right.
If you want to hear great funk rock, the first two Chili Peppers albums, and then you need to switch to Fishbone or Infectious Grooves or something like that. What this album starts and what they kind of do after this, before they mellow out on Californication stuff, is what Limp Bizkit was. It's the rap metal fusion thing. So they get credit for creating that. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but I think you really tapped into what really is the negative of this album, and that is that it is way too long. There is no reason for this album to be this long. And you know, we talked in a previous episode about Smashing Pumpkins and about how they kind of have this signature sound, and after an hour, it starts to drone a little bit. This is that times 100. They have a very distinct sound, and after 7, 8 tracks, it really starts to grate on you. And I've always felt that way about the Chili Peppers. The other thing I will add in here, I think this band has 3 really talented musicians in it, and Anthony Kiedis. I kind of agree with you. Michael has never done it for me. I've always found him kind of annoying. I have seen these guys live, I think 3 times over the years, once in their heyday, once fairly recently. All 3 times, they were terrible. They were terrible live. And the first time I thought, it was a bad night. And the second time I thought, well, maybe I'm just not catching these guys. I just don't think they're a good live band at all. And the last time I saw them would have been in the early 2000s in Houston. They had the unfortunate fate of having the Foo Fighters open for them. And the Foo Fighters at that time just had like the one album out, and they were still relatively new. After Foo Fighters played, the Chili Peppers had nothing to work with. Like they were just awful. I think we left like 5 songs in. It was so bad. And so if you're one of those people out there that thinks this is a great live band, I would love for someone to show me that, because I've never seen it. And I have seen these guys live many, many times. I've always thought they were terrible. So I'm kind of going to land in the middle here and say that I don't think this is a horrible album. I think it's way too long. And it certainly wears out its welcome. And if you don't like what they do, which is what it sounds like to me, Michael, that you just don't like this groove they're in, then this isn't going to ever work for you. You're not going to be able to play it enough to have it win you over. But I think if you like the first 2 Chili Peppers albums, there's a little bit of that here. It tapers off, but there's a little bit of that here. There might be something for you. If you're a fan of Californication and some of the stuff they've done since, there's probably nothing for you here, honestly, maybe other than Under the Bridge. This is one that I kind of agree with you, that I never really understood why it was so popular. When they kind of just are to me, a one-note band.
I feel like they should have had about the same career path as Fishbone. Well, honestly, I think Fishbone should have had Red Hot Chili Peppers' career path, and Red Hot Chili Peppers should have had Fishbone. Because like Fishbone is amazing. So it's not that I'm 100% against funk rock or that idea of trying to kind of fuse those things together. I also am a fan of Flea's bass playing to some degree. I think he obviously is very, very good at what he does. And it's interesting that you mentioned kind of the first 2 albums and then how that starts to switch. He actually talks about how he was listening to Sonic Youth, I believe, and Kim Gordon's playing, and decided to kind of back off of the slap bass. There's only, I think he said, 1 or 2 tracks on Blood Sugar Sex Magik where he plays using the slap method. He goes to a more traditional bass playing method on this album. Not that he isn't still rocking out on it, but he does kind of change. And of course, slap bass is so intricately tied to kind of the sound of those first 2 albums. Of funk in general.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because even though it doesn't have a slap bass line, it doesn't have that Red Hot Chili Peppers sound, if you want to call it that. Listen to the bass line of Under the Bridge. That song has a fantastic bass line, and that it doesn't need. It's a ballad. It could have just been a sort of a slow, walking, foundation kind of bass line. It's not that. It has this beautiful, like, kind of, melodic bass line under that song. It's really, really good.
This is great party music. It's great party music. Even if you don't like the album, if you go into a house party and this album's on and it's jamming and people are bouncing around and having a good time, and you get the kind of rap funk thing going on, it's great party music. And I think that's a big reason why they're as popular as they are, or at least were back in those days. And I will also defend Under the Bridge. I know it got played out. I know it got played a million times, but that is a beautiful song. It just is. There's no 2 ways around it.
It's the production on that song. It's the back vocals, and just it's so lush, I think, and It definitely got played out. I think there's probably people out there going out like with your same sentiment. I don't ever need to hear that song again. But take yourself out of that for a minute and really listen to that song. It's a really well done track.
I will agree the production is great. Rick Rubin actually does great production. I mean, as almost always he does. I will also say I absolutely hated Under the Bridge from the very first moment I heard it. And never liked it. I just absolutely do not like that song. It just, oh man, I don't know why. I mean, I like other music that's probably, in the same vein. Some of these things are just ineffable, right? Like why not? We're getting into this with you guys' albums as well, I'm sure. Like, it is what it is, but man, yeah, from the get-go, I did not like Under the Bridge and actually every other single on this album, to be honest. Like I Give It Away is the only one that I didn't have a very visceral just dislike for right off the bat, honestly, but the other ones all just left me so cold, and I've never warmed up to him. Yeah, Californication is okay. Other Side is a great song, but it doesn't even really feel to me like a Red Hot Chili Pepper song, although maybe that's what they do now. I don't know. I'm not sure that I listened to anything really by them after Californication. But anyway, Red Hot Chili Peppers fans, roast me in the comments. I am sure someone out there is just wanting to like punch through their speaker. I was going to say through the screen, but we don't do video on this podcast, so you'll have to throw your iPhone in disgust or something.
You should all be thankful for that, by the way.
Yeah. Nobody needs to see this. We don't need to unleash that on anybody. But apologies to Red Hot Chili Peppers fans. It's just not for me. All right, who can we offend next? Keith, why don't you offend somebody and get me off the hook here?
Alrighty, I've been offending people for 50 some odd years now. Shouldn't be too difficult. This one for me, this is not a band or not a record that I dislike. This is actually, it's a fine album. It's perfectly all right. But at KTXT at the time, everybody there seemed to think that this album was like the second coming of Nevermind or Sgt. Pepper or something like that. Like this was the greatest album ever. And what I'm talking about is Rubberneck by the Toadies. This album came out in '94. It wasn't just big on college radio. I mean, it had a pretty good run. It got to number 56 on the Billboard 200. Possum Kingdom, which was the lead single. Actually, it wasn't. It was the second single, but it was the big single off it. Got to number 9 on the mainstream rock charts and number 4 on the modern rock tracks. So this album was popular everywhere, not just at KTXT. But like I said, at the radio station at the time, man, people were falling all over themselves about this album. And it's just not that to me. It's a totally solid hard rock record, but it was not game changing in any way. It was not the kind of, this is where music is going and what it's going to be from now on, which seemed to be like at the time at the radio station, what a lot of people thought. Like I said, it's fine. It's good. It's got what I think 2 really great songs on it, and I'll get to those here in just a second. But for the most part, about 2/3 of this album is 2 to 3.5 minute long little bursts of just furious guitar rock. And they are all pretty good, but only one of them to me actually like totally sticks the landing, and that's Mr. Love. And it is one of the 2 what I think are legitimately great songs on this album. Every other song on this album that's in this vein wants to be Mr. Love and just doesn't quite get there. There's some other good ones. Backslider is pretty good. I Come From the Water is pretty good. All of them are pretty good. But man, Mr. Love is the one that lands. And we played it at KTXT. I don't recall it being huge for us, but we did run it. We ran Possum Kingdom, obviously. That was the big one that everybody did. And then, like I said, their biggest single. But aside from that, you got those, like I said, 6 or 7 really kind of short guitar rockers. And then there are a handful of songs that break the mold a little bit. Those being Possum Kingdom, Away, Tyler, and I Burn. Again, one of those to me is legitimately a great song, that being Tyler. Tyler, to me, is the best song on this album. And it's not close. It's easily the best song on this album. And one thing I do remember from the college radio days back when I was the music director, we were running this album. We'd gotten through with Possum Kingdom. It had kind of had its big run, and we were playing Tyler. We were running that one, and I got a call from whoever their rep was, their music rep at the time, and they were pushing another song. I'm pretty sure it was Away, because that ended up being the 3rd single off this album. And so I told him, well, it's a good song, but we're already playing Tyler. And I remember the guy being like, Tyler, that's kind of an interesting choice. That's not one we would really have thought about. we were a CMJ Core 50 reporter at the time, and so I used to always look at everybody's lists on the Core 50 reporters in the CMJ magazine. And it wasn't long after that that I started seeing Tyler pop up in other places, and then not long after that that Tyler actually got released as a single. So I was always kind of proud of the fact that we kind of scooped everybody on Tyler. I think we were playing that a little bit ahead of everybody else. So I'm gonna take a little credit there, pat myself on the back that I was on that one a little bit before I think everyone else was. But yeah, to me, easily the best song on that album. The entire album is pretty good. It's not terrible. There's not any bad songs on it. There's nothing I would skip over if I was going to listen to it. It's just a solid rock record. It's just not anything more to me than a solid rock record. And as I said, at KTXT at least, I don't know if it was this way at other college radio stations, but at KTXT, the people were falling all over themselves about this album, and it just never was that for me. I never got it. I never understood quite why people thought it was as good as they obviously thought it was.
So mark your calendars, because I'm about to 100% agree with Keith for the first time ever. I had a lot of thoughts when you brought this record up, and this album's heyday was sort of, I think it came out while I was at KTXT and blew up right after I left. So I kind of missed the hype on this album, but I do remember hearing a lot about it. It's funny, I was for some other reason, some other show we were doing or something, I looked up the most underrated albums of the 90s, and hundreds of albums come up on those lists, but two pop up on there consistently. One of them is I Am an Elastic Firecracker by Tripping Daisy. The other one is this album. And my thought when I saw that was, well, both those albums, in case of both those albums, they may be underrated nationally. If you lived in Texas in the early 90s, those albums were not underrated. They were very possibly overrated. When it comes to the Toadies, I always kind of liked them, but I never liked them enough to really get into them in a big way. I thought they were kind of derivative of some other stuff. I thought they were just sort of like hammering home what everyone else was doing at the time. I never really thought they were all that, I guess. Possum Kingdom is a good song, but I don't think it deserves to be on the pedestal that it's on. It's still played like crazy on the rock stations around here, and you still hear people talk about it. It's a good song, but it's not that song. It shouldn't be as iconic as it is. I agree with you wholeheartedly that if there is a song on this album that should be iconic, it's Tyler. That song is fantastic, and I loved it from the second I heard it. I think what they are doing vocally in that song is just amazing. Like the way the vocals kind of build to a scream along with the music, and just everything about that song is damn near perfect. And then, the other songs on this album I really like. You mentioned Mr. Love. That's a great song. I really like that one. And I Come From the Water as well. That was the other one that I wrote down as one that I really enjoyed. So yeah, I am in complete agreement with you on this. I think this is a fine album. I think it's good, but I think it was, at least in our circle at that time, very overhyped, and have never been able to really put my finger on the whys of that. It's perfectly serviceable. It's a good rock record, but it doesn't need to be mentioned in the same breath as some of the albums it gets mentioned with, I think.
It's funny that you mentioned the vocal on Tyler. I think Todd Lewis is a fine vocalist. I think he's kind of limited in what he can do, but that song in particular is just perfect for what he does. It works better than anything else on that album. That song was meant for him to sing it, for sure.
I agree. Tyler's far and away the best song on that album, and not just the best song on that album, but just a very, very, very good song. Full stop. I think that our perception of it is a little different because of, like Scott mentioned, they're a Fort Worth band. For us in Lubbock, not really having a local music scene, the DFW scene was probably the closest thing we had to a local music scene. So we embraced the Toadies, the Tripping Daisy, Hagfish, those bands that were coming out, Tabula Rasa. Those guys are all in the film, by the way, except for Tripping Daisy. Tiny bit of an awkward situation in that I interviewed Toadies for the film, but I mean, KTXT, we embrace them as a local band, and so I think we gave them, and they came to Lubbock and played shows, and so I think there was definitely a perception of them being, some hometown hero type thing happening, so that everyone really got behind them. And they're very nice people. When they came for the interview, they were great, which is why I reached out to them for the film. So in all of those senses, they are good people who made a really good album, and we really embrace that at KTXT. My thing with the album is that I think Possum Kingdom is one of the weaker songs on the album, personally. Like Possum Kingdom isn't a song that I really care that much about, but it has such a big impact culturally. Like even to this day, like Scott said, I was just watching, there's a new Marvel movie coming out called Thunderbolts. There's the first trailer they did had the Pixies in it. The second trailer they did had Possum Kingdom in it. It is a huge, huge song. I was watching For All Mankind, which is an Apple TV show that's an alternative history of what would happen if the Soviets had won the race to the moon, and then it splits off into this alternate history. When they get to the 90s, the signifying song that they use that we're in the 90s now is Possum Kingdom. Like it has a much larger cultural footprint than you would think for a song that wasn't even necessarily, this wasn't a Smells Like Teen Spirit level song, but it was huge. It was definitely huge. It was big on MTV. But for me personally, not my favorite song on the album. I love Tyler, love Mr. Love. Backslider, great. A couple other songs are solid, but yeah, I'm in the middle on it. It's not one that I think of as being like a top 10 of the 90s for sure kind of album, and maybe not necessarily a top 20 album of the 90s. But it is one that I think, for the DFW scene, for the Texas music scene, it stands out a lot higher. I think, if you were to do a top 5 bands of the 90s in Texas, it would be hard to not choose the Toadies because the album is good enough and the cultural imprint of Possum Kingdom is big enough that I do think you have to acknowledge that. So then after this album, they record another album that gets rejected by the label, which is why there isn't really a follow-up to this album until much, much later. So they miss their window of being able to, I think, build on top of Rubberneck and build their legacy so that we see Rubberneck almost in isolation. I don't think many people even know about the Toadies' next album, which is Heaven Above, Hell Below, I think is the name of it. If you listen to it, you'll see that they were kind of trying to really push beyond the limits of what you hear on Rubberneck, and they were much more experimental on that one. If you kind of work backwards from it, you do see a little bit of that in Rubberneck, where they were pushing a tiny bit against the edges of grunge or alternative rock at that time. I think Tyler's probably the best example of them stretching a little bit further. But even Possum Kingdom musically, I think is a little more interesting than a lot of the other grunge stuff that was coming out. That said, I can see where you're coming from because of the giant imprint it had on us in Lubbock and on us as Texas music fans, because they were around a lot. They did a lot of shows. We certainly gave them all the airplay you could possibly give an album at that time. So yeah, it's interesting that Possum Kingdom became as big as it did. I think Tyler deserves to be that song. It would not surprise me at all if Tyler had become the cultural juggernaut that Possum Kingdom kind of became, but it didn't work out that way for whatever reason. That said, shout out to the Toadies. I still love you guys, and thanks for being in the film. But
I wanted to mention this because I think there's a thing to this. You guys on a previous episode had mentioned Deep Blue Something, Breakfast at Tiffany's. That song was one that blew up nationwide years after it was a hit around Lubbock, Texas. So by the time that song blew up, we had all heard it a billion times, and we're kind of over it, honestly. On some level, maybe not at that high of a level, but on some level, that's what happened with Possum Kingdom too. When that song started blowing up, I was a year into hearing it all the time, and I think maybe that's where my memories of it sort of fade out, and maybe are a little less whatever. I think Possum Kingdom is a fine song. You're right, though. I think if I was given this album and said, pick a single off of this, I wouldn't get to that one. It would be number 7, number 8, something like that. But it is, for some reason it worked on people. But yeah, it was one of those that by the time it got its due on a big scale, I was over it. Much like Breakfast at Tiffany's, although maybe not quite that bad.
I will also echo Michael in saying that these are really good guys, and gal in Lisa Umbarger's case. I did meet them at a show they did here in town. We got to interview them. I didn't do the interview. I can't remember now who did, but KTXT got an interview with them, and I did get to meet the band. And you're right, they are really nice people. So I don't want to slag off their work too much because they were really great to meet.
All right, so that's 2 albums. We've alienated and angered 2 fan bases now. We might as well go for the trifecta. Scott, who are we going to piss off next?
I'm going to go for the biggest gang of all. I'm coming after U2.
Oh boy.
So the album I chose is U2's Achtung Baby. I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you kind of where I land on this band and this album. So I have never loved these guys. I always kind of appreciated them in their early years. I thought they definitely had a unique sound. They definitely had, something going on. It just really was never for me. And they have songs that I like and over those early albums, but overall I was just never a huge fan of these guys. When the Joshua Tree happened and blew up, I appreciated that album for the moments on it that worked for me. I always really liked Bullet the Blue Sky, and then Where the Streets Have No Name is fantastically produced, and there's a lot of stuff of good things to say about the Joshua Tree. But I never really understood the hype on this band. So I have to add in here that, for a band that I really don't like that much, I have seen these guys live so many times. I think I have seen them live 6 or 7 times. There are bands I adore I haven't seen live 6 times. So, and the way it happens is I always kind of fall backwards into seeing U2 live. But anyway, the reason that's important to this story is I was taken to see them on the Joshua Tree tour in Austin, Texas. It was a fine show, but what I noticed about it was they were performing on a barren stage. There was no backdrop. There was no sets. There was nothing. It was a bunch of stacks on a stage with cords running everywhere. The microphone had a cord. All the guitars had cords. Bono tripped at least 4 times, like running around, tripping on cords. They were everywhere. And so at that moment, I remember thinking, okay, that's what people like about them. They're raw. They're minimalistic. They're doing this themselves. There's no trickery or overproduction here. They're just who they are, and that's the appeal. It's not for me, but that's what people like about them. And, right after that, Rattle and Hum comes out. I think Rattle and Hum is a wildly underappreciated album. The new stuff on it is good. The live stuff on it improves on all those songs that, in their non-live versions. I think they're better live than they are recorded. That one's neither here nor there. But even Rattle and Hum has this sort of, it's just us, we're out on the road, we're being influenced by these different sounds from America, all of that. So I'm not a fan of the band, but I'm on board with that's who they are. These simple guys doing simple music that works for people and blah, blah, blah. So then comes Achtung Baby, which takes all those things I just said and throws them right out the window. This is the most overproduced, polished, slick album maybe ever. So I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand how these people who adored this band that was known for doing that is suddenly doing this, and now we're all cool with that too. And there's a lot of other factors here that sort of played into that. We've talked in the past about pretentious douchebaggery, and Bono is their king. And I remember when the video for The Fly came out and he's wearing those stupid glasses, and just everything about this album was rubbing me the wrong way as it continued to get more and more and more popular. And I could never get anyone to explain to me why we were okay with this wild shift in who they are and what they do. Now, that said, 20-year-old me was a much different person than the me now. Things like doing pretentious stuff in your videos and getting famous on being this raw minimalistic band and then doing this album, things like that really irked me back then. And so I really kind of rode my hatred for this album for a long time. Cut to 30 years later, I've seen U2 live 5 more times, and I have started to appreciate some of the songs on this album for what they are, which is there's some really, really well-written and good songs on this album. I particularly like, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I particularly like Until the End of the World and Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses. I think those are both fantastic songs. Unfortunately, I have to watch Bono sing them, but there really is some good stuff here. So I'm sort of here to back off on what has been a long time of really dismissing and sort of putting down this album. But I will still say, all of that said, that I still don't get it. I still don't get why this album blew them up the way it did when it was such a departure from what they were known for, famous for, and good at. Even though that wasn't for me, this certainly wasn't for me at the time. And I never understood why their fans were just so willing to embrace this complete shift. And the other thing I'm going to add here is the last two times I saw U2 live was the show they did at the Sphere here in Las Vegas, which from an audio visual perspective is hands down the most incredible thing I've ever seen. But my reaction both times I saw it at that show was, this would have been so much better if they didn't insist on doing Octung Baby in its entirety. If you haven't seen the set list from those shows, it's Octung Baby, all of it. One song from Unforgettable Fire, two songs from The Joshua Tree, and one, maybe two from Rattle and Hum, then all of Octung Baby, and then a few of the new songs like 1, 2, 3, 14 and all that stuff. They really should have taken the opportunity to make that show at the Sphere a career spanning retrospective of all of their music. It would have been so much better. So what was hands down the most incredible audiovisual thing I've ever seen was brought down a couple pegs by Octung Baby. I didn't feel the need for them to do that. A few of these songs would have been fine. So long story short, I didn't get this album when it came out. I still really kind of don't get it, although I will back off a little bit and say that I think it's much better than I gave it credit for back in the day. But it's still, for an album that sold 18 million copies and launched this band into the stratosphere in popularity, I just don't hear it when I listen to this album. I don't hear how that happened. So I know there's at least one U2 fan sitting on the other side of this microphone, so I'll let you guys chime in.
Yeah, that's right. There is one. And for my money, this is the last great U2 album. I think their career splits easily in half. It's Octung Baby and everything that went before. That's where I'm a U2 fan, and then there's everything that's come since then. And there have been good songs on all the albums since then, but nothing like the first half of their career. My experience with this album is a little different because I was expecting something different. You know, that was kind of the buzz before the album came out. This was going to be like a radical departure and it can be something completely new for U2. And then the first single was The Fly, and The Fly is still my favorite song on that album. I love that song. And so when it came out, I wanted there to be 12 songs that sounded like The Fly on there, and that's not what Octung Baby is. It is a departure from what had gone before. I think if you look at it now kind of in the context of the rest of their career, it doesn't seem as radical a departure as it did at the time, because a lot of the rest of their career kind of has followed along, you know, on those lines. But when I first got it, I was disappointed in it. I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, based on the fact that I thought it was going to be, you know, like I said, a big departure in 12 songs that were kind of, I don't want to say punky, but, you know, the guitar-driven kind of interesting rock that is The Fly. And it's not that. It has some other songs that kind of sound like that on it, but it isn't that in general. Over the years, I have completely come around to really embrace this album. I think, like I said, it's one of their best. Pretty much everything on it works for me, although I do both like both of the songs that you mentioned, Until the End of the World and Wild Horses. I think the lyrics on Wild Horses are a little silly, but a lot of Bono's lyrics are a little silly, so I won't hold that against him. Yeah, this to me, like I said, it's the last great U2 album. There's not anything on it I would change. The only blemish on it to me at all, and it's not a serious one, but I am not a fan of Mysterious Ways, which was probably the biggest song off of this album. If gun to head, I had to take one song off of this album, it would be Mysterious Ways. I don't understand that one, why it quite got as big as it did. But overall, yeah, I think this is a fantastic album. And I saw them on this tour. I saw one of those Sphere shows as well. These songs come across really well live for me. I take the other side on this one. I think this is a really good U2 record, one of their best. And I really still, even to this day, like it probably better now than I did even at the time it came out.
So I am very much not a U2 fan. Bono absolutely rubs me the wrong way, as he does a lot of people, I think. But he's tough to get past. And this era of Bono, where he was, you know, he had a character called The Fly. When you put on the glasses, he became a different character. And I could do without all of that crap. Like that did not speak to me. It did not work on me. And it made me... It reinforced my dislike for U2 when this album came out. So it's not that I hate songs like Where the Streets Have No Name is a perfectly good song. I Will Follow. You know, they have songs that I appreciate, or like I wouldn't turn them off if they came on, but I don't have any, I never bought a U2 album. I never was a U2 fan. I've never seen them live. When Octoon Baby came out, I wasn't interested, didn't really care that much about it. I heard Mysterious Ways a lot. Then obviously we started playing some of the songs on KTXT as well. I don't know that we really pushed U2 that hard because they were so big that I don't know that we really played a ton of them, but they were in rotation at KTXT for sure, and that's probably where I was exposed to them. That said, I think it was 97 or 98. For whatever reason, I completely came around to Octoon Baby. It's the only U2 album in my library. It is the only album I really know front to back and enjoy front to back. And again, there's, like I said, they have songs from the Joshua Tree and all the way back to Boy era that are perfectly fine. They have some songs that have come out since that are fine, but I don't really know the albums that well, and I certainly don't own them. I actually really, really, really love Octoon Baby now for some reason. And then maybe that's the problem, is that someone like me actually really got into Octoon Baby, but I wasn't a fan of what they were doing before. So I didn't have any preconceived notions of what they should be or what they shouldn't be, or, what changes would make me like them more or less. I really just kind of ignored it when it came out because I didn't think I would like it, because I didn't think that I liked U2, not maybe realizing how different it was. And I just never really gave it a shot as an album. I actually always kind of liked Mysterious Ways, oddly enough. So I'm kind of on the opposite side of this from both of you guys in that way, and that I like the album, and the song that I do like that got me into it was in fact Mysterious Ways. I love the guitar line. I think it's a great, really catchy song. My favorite song on the album I think is Acrobat. I really, really like Acrobat, but the ones you guys mentioned as well. It definitely is a very cohesive album. I think it plays really well front to back as like a body of work, shall we say. Very different, obviously, like you said, from Rattle and Hum and from Joshua Tree and what came before. Probably kind of does inform what happens after this, but they never hit this high again with this particular kind of incarnation of their sound. But yeah, I actually really, everything about this album kind of works for me, other than Bono's personality and some of the lyrics. But I like the production is fantastic. I think some of the guitar sounds and some of the things they're doing are just really interesting to me. I can kind of say in retrospect now, it does stand out from some of the other music of that era. I was thinking it was more 93-ish. So maybe that isn't as true, but in a world of a lot of grunge music and as the grunge copycats came along, this one does stand out, obviously, as being different from that. So that helps it, I think. But that's an argument that I'm making in hindsight. So I can't super stand by that. So you guys may not feel that way, but I guess it's the U2 album for the non U2 fan. Maybe that's the problem, is if you're a U2 fan, you may like every other aspect of their career, but this may stand out as kind of an outlier. And to me, it was the one album that really got me into them, and that I really enjoy pretty much every song. It feels to me like a really solid album front to back. Does U2 deserve to be on the tier that they were on or are on? You could definitely argue that on both sides, and I'm sure we'll have people that agree with that and disagree with that. But yeah, that's kind of my take. I am maybe not the best person to ask, but yeah, I actually think that's their best work and definitely my favorite U2 album for sure.
I think, Keith, you mentioned something interesting that, you didn't particularly like it when you first heard it, and maybe that was common amongst the U2 fans. If you were a big fan of the Joshua Tree or even Rattle and Hum for that matter, this is such a wild departure from that I think maybe I wasn't alone in being rubbed the wrong way by it. It just, everybody else gave it enough listens to let it come around, and I wasn't willing to do that. This album did have some big sort of mainstream singles on it that I think went beyond their fan base. Mysterious Ways obviously is the best example of that. It's a fine song. It's catchy. And, you mentioned another song, the lyrics being kind of dumb. Mysterious Ways is definitely that. That's fifth grade poetry at its finest. But it is a catchy song. It's a good song. I don't know. I really think, when I went back and listened to the whole album again, and obviously, like I said, I saw the Sphere show, so I've seen this performed live a couple times now and stuff like that. I really don't think my issue, although I would have said at the time my issue with this album was the music and all that stuff. I don't know that it was that as much as it was them. It was their image and the way they were marketed, and just the way that they had sort of built this fan base off of something and then completely abandoned it. Just everything about it rubbed me the wrong way, to where I think I wasn't opening my ears to this album. And, and now that I have, like I said, I think they're all really great songs on it. And I think overall it's fine, but I still can't wrap my brain around the fact that this is, I think if U2 disappeared tomorrow, this is the album they're going to be remembered for. And I don't know. I would take the Joshua Tree over that any second. But you also mentioned, that they announced that this was going to be this radical departure. Apparently, they were very upset at the reception of Rattle and Hum, which I know a lot of their fans really hated when it came out. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because it had previously released stuff on it or whatever. It didn't feel like a new album. It felt kind of like half a new album, I guess. But I always kind of liked that album. I don't know. But yeah, I think maybe all those things kind of thrown in the pot and stirred together just led to, I was never going to give this album a shot. And now that I've gotten a little older and some of that stuff doesn't bother me anymore, and I have given it a shot, I can say it's gone from a 0 to a 6 for me. But I still don't think it's the masterpiece that it's advertised as. I looked it up, and this was on the 2012 Rolling Stone Greatest Albums of All Time list, which, obviously is subjective and whatever. But it's like number 71. It's way up there. And I believe it is the highest U2 album on that list. Which I guess, Michael, you would agree with. I think their hardcore fans might disagree with that. I don't know. I mean, what would you say, Keith?
I feel like I'm the outlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Keith's probably the best.
I would say, Keith, what would you say is U2's best album? What's the album they should be remembered for if they fell off the planet tomorrow?
The Joshua Tree, and it's not close for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Joshua Tree is by far their best album.
As a casual fan, I completely agree with that. That's their signature album. That's the album that sounds like U2, and then this album just isn't. But
I would probably even take Unforgettable Fire and War before I would take Achtung Baby, but Achtung Baby would be next. It would be probably my fourth, choice if I'm ranking the U2 albums. The thing about this album is, I said I was disappointed. I still liked it when it came out. I think part of the reason why it's got the radical departure on sound, though, is that, these were famously hard sessions for these guys. Like, this band almost broke up during the Berlin sessions when they were working on this album. And there was some tension between, I think it was Bono and The Edge, both, who wanted to go a little more kind of in the radical direction, and Larry Mullen and Adam Clayton wanted to stay with kind of what they did. And I think what you ended up getting before the end of it, I said my disappointment was that it was not as different as I expected it to be. I think what ended up saving the band, and probably kind of even saving this record from maybe its worst, overindulgences, was that tension in the band, that they were able to kind of pull it back and put some more kind of U2-ish songs on there and make it sound a little more like what they normally sounded like, even though it's got, kind of the departure on some of the sounds and some of the song structures and all that stuff. So I think maybe the band needed this album, not just to kind of advance their career, but even to stay together and continue to have a career. And I think that tension possibly is why it turned out, as good as it did.
And then they embraced all their worst impulses on pop.
Yeah. I mean, they went too far.
I was just going to say, though, before anyone thinks that I'm sitting here saying I like the guitar-driven U2 over the electronic-y U2, I think Numb is one of their greatest moments in recorded music. I just love that song. And I don't know how the fans feel about it, whatever, but that song makes me so happy.
I really like Numb. I see it as just like a complete,
It is. It's a total, outlier in their catalog, but man, do I love that song.
Like I said, all of their albums post Achtung have good songs on them. Some of them have great songs on them, but I don't think any of those albums stick together the way that Achtung and everything that came before it do.
All right, so we've alienated a good 75% of our audience now. I think between Red Hot Chili Peppers, U2, and the Toadies covers like a lot of our local Texas folks. So yeah, I think we've angered enough people for now. But we need that. What do they call it in the world? The social media. We need that engagement, as they say in the social world. It's kind of like the, any press is good press. So if we've pissed people off and they comment in our social media, then we've done our job. So we're true podcasters now. We weren't really pushing those buttons before, but now we're working into the world of trying to get people to engage. Honestly, though, I am curious. I'm sure we have Red Hot Chili Peppers fans and U2 fans, and I know we have Toadies fans in our group. We might have the Toadies themselves.
Sorry.
We're sorry.
Our bad. No, and again, I don't think it was any of us said that we didn't like the album, but yeah, it had a huge impact in Texas, and you know what? Good for them. They still tour, by the way. They still have a great fan base. Like they still have shows all over the place, as all three of these bands do. So maybe we don't know what we're talking about. Who knows? But yeah, let us know. Actually, I'm more interested. I think finding a defense of any of these bands would actually be pretty easy. I'm more interested in bands that you did not get. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh my God, yeah, everyone and their dog loved this album and I hated it. That's actually what I'm more interested in hearing. So let us know what albums you did not get that everyone else seemed to. And, maybe we'll do this again, depending on how angry people are at us after this one. We'll see.
Tell me your favorite band. I'll put some on this podcast for you.
Yeah, right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're not too pissed off yet and you want to go help us out, 35,000 Watts, The Story of College Radio, is available now on Amazon Prime Video and Google Play. Go rent it or buy it. And then if you are so inclined, if you were to rate and review the movie, regardless of how you feel about it, just, be honest. We're not asking for anything specific, but if you watch it on Amazon Prime Video, please leave a rating and a review, and that helps us out a lot. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time on 35,000 Watts, the podcast.